Hey, welcome to the show. I'm Chris Smiley. Glad to be back in the studio. We're streaming live on Facebook, Jadu TV. You can message on Facebook if you have any questions, and I'll be sure to answer them. So today, I want to talk to you about some really important issues, as usual. So we had President Obama leaving office, and I was deeply disturbed by some of the reactions that I saw. A lot of very sentimental farewells being given, especially from a lot of supposedly liberal people. So if you watched my previous show, I had mentioned that I view pseudo-liberalism as far more dangerous than conservatism because I think we can much more clearly see the dangers with the conservative ideology, but it's this liberal ideology from the Democratic establishment, from establishment politics, that I feel is much more dangerous because, they have this masquerade of being liberal, of being peaceful, of supporting the poor and impoverished, and they retain a lot of support of minorities and social justice advocates in this country because of this facade, this aura, this image of being for the people, for the working class people. But in reality, the Democratic establishment is advancing the same oppressive policies. So this is a really critical problem. So when we're seeing, Trump come into office, my real concern is that he's going to push all of these people back into the Democratic Party because of their reaction to what the Trump presidency is going to bring us. So, what it comes down to is the two major parties are owned and supported by the same elite groups that carry out the same oppressive policies, and that's something we'll go over today as we discuss Obama's legacy. I'm just really confused at how, after 8 years, that some people still don't have a clear understanding of what he's about. Okay, I'm just going to check a couple things on Facebook here. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them over Facebook. You can also call in on the studio line at the bottom of the screen. Okay. So we have a lot of people in major media outlets that are presumed to be leftists or social justice advocates, but end up defending the establishment, end up defending the powers that be in a lot of their horrific policies. So, we need to really out these people and their claims because too many people are being suckered into the wrong side. When we're talking about peace and justice, we have too many people being suckered into the Democratic Party, too many people being pulled into these sides that don't really have the American people's best interest. They don't have the world's best interest at hand. So I came across this article this past week as Obama was leaving office from Ta-Nehisi Coates. And let me pull up something from him so you can see what he's about. So Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's a writer for The Atlantic. He's written a number of books, and his most recent article, which I'll show you right here, was called "My President Was Black." So Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's a popular African-American writer. He has over 800,000 followers on Twitter. He's written a lot of pretty big articles, some very powerful and strong arguments. He's even called for reparations for black Americans that have slave ancestors. And he also has a comic book, a political comic book called Black Panther. This is Coates right here. And this is his comic book, Black Panther. So, one would expect to see a very liberal ideology coming from Coates, and we often do, but like so many other popular mainstream liberals, they end up defending Obama and the establishment, even under the face of like so much horrific policies and actions. So his recent article about Obama's presidency, titled "My President Was Black," it was a very sentimental and extensive piece, and I have a clip here of him talking about this article, and let's listen to this real quick.
He's sincere. You know, he's deeply, deeply, deeply sincere. The optimism is not a joke. It's not a game.
He's
it's
still
not a put on. He's still optimistic to this very day. I don't think it's a joke. I mean, some of this might be a little bit of stagecraft for the country, but I think he really, really believes in the resiliency of American people.
And has he lost that optimism?
No. No.
Thank you.
No.
Yeah, you call him a deeply moral human being, one of the greatest presidents in American history.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that very much so.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, thank you very much.
Well, a deeply moral human being. I don't know how this man can sit back after 8 years and claim that Obama has been a deeply moral human being. I mean, he's been horrifically immoral. He's committed atrocities that I can't even properly convey through words. But we're going to give it a try. We're going to go over some of Obama's policies and history and how we can expect those things to continue with this Trump presidency. So Obama, he's been a typical politician, a typical president. He's worked for globalism, imperialism, elite business interests. I mean, just one look at his foreign policy decisions should turn the stomach of any viewer. And as commander-in-chief, Obama, he has control over the military, and he's had our military active in numerous countries: Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, Somalia. I mean, he's overseen invasions, assassinations, coups, unlawful imprisonment, just a tremendous amount of things he's overseen. So we'll go over some of the highlights and try to break down this really confusing thought process from some people that we're seeing in the mainstream media. So in Afghanistan, something that was, just so evidently wrong, and that he has taken on as his own war. Let me bring up a statistic here. So, President George W. Bush initiated the invasion of Afghanistan, but it was really escalated under President Obama. If you remember, it was under President Obama that he implemented the surge, a massive increase of troops, of violence, of military operations. Let's pull up this chart right here. So if you look here, look at the fatalities. These are the coalition fatalities, and I brought it up for specifically United States military fatalities. If you look here, under the Bush years, you're seeing 48, 52. It isn't until Obama gets into office around 2008, 2009, you're really seeing a massive escalation. I mean, in 2010, we had about 500 United States soldiers killed. So this was a war that Obama was extremely set on seeing through, that he was extremely set on escalating, and we can see just the massive devastation that has incurred from his decisions. I mean, we had over 20,000 United States soldiers injured, forever maimed, and as of this past August, we had over 31,000 civilians violently killed in Afghanistan. 31,000. I mean, this has just been a country that's been completely devastated. Something we've talked about the last few episodes on this TV show. Over 30,000 civilians have been wounded. I think these numbers are very low estimates. I think a lot of the estimates we can see over 91,000 Afghans, civilians, soldiers, militants have been killed, according to a UN study. Just look at 2009, his first year in office. The UN mission in Afghanistan concluded that there had been 596 Afghan civilian fatalities, civilians killed in Afghanistan in just 2009, his first year in office. And as we saw in the previous chart, as soon as Obama got into office, he was escalating this conflict as well as many other conflicts. So, Afghanistan has been a country that's been just completely demolished in a sense, completely put into chaos and violence. You can see here a picture from some civilian casualties. This is war. I think I usually bring up foreign policy first when I talk about any sort of political debate about a person, a candidate, or how they've been doing, because we're talking about the most serious thing on the planet, some of the most horrific things on the planet here, when we're talking about these horrific numbers of violent deaths. And this was just one country that Obama has overseen and had his fingers in. I mean, some critics might point out, well, Bush started that war. Obama was just carrying it out. But there's been plenty of countries that Obama has initiated the military conflicts, where he's personally been the overseer of turning a country from a stable society into complete chaos. Libya, for example. In the Libya war, which the United States initiated, the UN Human Rights Council estimated about 15,000 people killed, and that was just in that first year. And as we see now, Libya is also in a state of instability like many other countries. What's ironic and unbelievable is the Bush administration actually worked with Gaddafi in many ways, and even reached an agreement eliminating their WMD programs, and had a lot of cooperation from them in Bush's war on terror. We can continue. The United States bombing of Yemen. He expanded the drone war in Yemen. I mean, he even gave the CIA permission to kill people when they didn't even know their identities, so long as they're just suspected of ties to terrorism. So the drone bombings is something that we really saw escalate under President Obama, with his kill list, which has been brought up a number of times, where the president would sit there and he would make the decision on who would live or die. He would be the judge, the jury, and the executioner for individuals with his drone wars. And we saw that this is something that has threatened not just foreign citizens, but a number of American citizens had been targeted and killed with Obama's drone program. We can continue on to now this escalation in Yemen. Yemen was a country that Obama had been active in drone bombing, and now with the Saudi-led military campaign, this country is in a complete state of civil war. The United Nations also estimated that about 3,800 civilians have been killed in this conflict in Yemen, with this Saudi-led coalition supported by the United States responsible for about 60% of the civilian deaths in Yemen. And I think the overall estimate is about 10,000 people have been killed in just the 18 months this civil war has been going on, with about 200,000 refugees, people trying to seek refuge abroad. So let's go over here to another quote from this article from Ta-Nehisi Coates. The feeling that this particular black family, the Obamas, represented the best of black people, the ultimate credit to the race, incomparable in elegance and bearing. I mean, these are some pretty nice words, some pretty elegant words for Obama, and I can't see something further from the truth. I mean, to say that he's the best of black people, the best of African Americans, I mean, he's been a ruthless oppressor of people of color. Mr. Coates, please explain to me how invasions of sovereign nations, killings of hundreds of thousands is elegant or representative of minorities. I don't understand how obliterating people of color off the planet is a credit to the race of the black people. So let's cut to a clip here from Dr. Cornel West and see if he can give us some clarity.
Well, one, I think that it's morally obscene and spiritually profane to spend $6 billion on an election, $2 billion on a presidential election, and not have any serious discussion. Poverty, trade unions being pushed against the wall, dealing with stagnating and declining wages when profits are still up and the 1% are doing very well. No talk about drones dropping bombs on innocent people. So we end up with such a narrow, truncated political discourse as the major problems: ecological catastrophe, climate change, global warming. So it's very sad. I mean, I'm glad there was not a right-wing takeover, but we end up with a Republican, a Rockefeller Republican in blackface with Barack Obama. So that our struggle in regard to poverty intensifies.
That's a pretty rough assessment of President Obama.
Oh, that's what we have. That's what we have. Richard Nixon is to the left of him on health care. Richard Nixon's to the left of him on guaranteed income. And the same policies in terms of imperial foreign policy is at work.
Some very strong words from Dr. Cornel West, but when we look at what has happened under President Obama, I think it's very appropriate. I mean, we're talking about some really horrific things that this man has overseen. And when it comes to that, I think we have to be honest and we have to be very aggressive in how we discuss these sorts of things so that people really understand the truth about what's going on. It's this sugarcoating of ideas and what's really happening that's so detrimental to the public understanding the reality of situations. So, Dr. Cornel West has pointed out that President Obama has not helped people of color here in America, around the world. I mean, one of the major issues domestically here in the United States is this issue of the prison industrial complex and how it affects Black America. Poverty and being imprisoned are really intertwined, and it disproportionately affects people of color here in the United States. Let me pull up a graphic for you to look at here. So in the United States, we have a real problem with imprisonment rates. I mean, we have only 4% of the world's population, but 25% of the prison population. We have a gross number of people that are serving in prison, and as I mentioned, people of color are disproportionately in prison. As we can see, 65% of nonviolent offenders serving life are Black Americans. So when we talk about Obama's legacy, it was a very historic thing for a minority to be elected to office, but we can't get caught up with certain things like that to ignore the blatant truth, to let him get away with certain things, to let our minds be manipulated as to what's really happening. Obama is a part of the same ruling elite. I mean, that's what we have here in the United States. These two parties we have, the Republicans and Democrats, are one and the same. We have to differentiate between people who actually fight for justice and people who oppose it. We have to really question this deeply, because evil is not going to come to us and approach us as a scary monster in today's world. Evil is going to approach you in a business suit that's going to look you straight in the eye. It's going to shake your hand and make you believe that it's good. This is what we have today. So, when we're talking about President Obama's legacy and the legacy of presidents in the United States and the legacy of politics in the United States, it's consistent. People get really caught up in the debates every year about, this interchanging of congressional representatives, of presidents. But I mean, let's just look at what's the policy that's being outputted. Let's look at the same people that are being recycled over and over. So under the Treasury Department, under Bill Clinton, we had Larry Summers and Timothy Geithner, who were then brought into Obama's administration to direct economic policy. And if you're not familiar with Geithner and Summers, I mean, these are some of the guys that have overseen some of the worst economic policies that have affected Americans. I think I have a photo of them together. Anyway, but Geithner, he was the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and then became Secretary of Treasury under President Obama. Also under President Obama, not only the financial crisis, but we had the same foreign policy directors. So, I mean, it's not even that he was recycling from the old Democratic establishment. He was recycling from the Republican establishment. He brought in, if you remember, Robert Gates as Secretary of Defense. Robert Gates was the Secretary of Defense under President Bush, was appointed to the same position under President Obama. I mean, Gates is the one who implemented the surge in Iraq, and he was also Secretary of Defense and helped implement the surge in Afghanistan. I mean, we're seeing the same people, the same foreign policies, the same people in the administration. So, let's look at another clip from Dr. Cornel West. See if we can get some clarity. So, interestingly enough, Cornel West had early on supported Obama's presidency in his campaign, but very quickly, as he began to see, what sort of policies and people were being implemented, quickly changed. his dialogue about the conversation. So let's hear.
Dr. Cornel West is among
This is from,
America's most
2011.
provocative intellectuals, a Princeton professor and lifelong pioneer of working class rights and racial justice.
So that I think we've had so much sleepwalking in the United States, where, of course, Wall Street oligarchs and corporate elites have been not just dominating, but in many ways looting billions and billions of dollars from the public funds, and based on their financial the shadow financial system, making billions and billions of dollars as poor and working people are pushed to the margins.
You call yourself a critical supporter of U.S. President Barack Obama. How would you assess his leadership, and particularly President Obama living up to the promises that he made when he became president?
Well, I think that he has now aligned himself with forces that promote the abandonment of poor people and the neglect of working people. So I would characterize Obama as a charismatic version of American exceptionalism with a Keynesian neoliberalism at home and a liberal neoconservatism abroad, which is to say he's the friendly face of the American empire abroad. And internally, he's a centrist now leaning toward the right. And he's in the process, actually, of becoming, very sadly, a pawn of big finance and a puppet of big business. And that's a very sad assessment because he's began with such magnificent Democratic rhetoric during the campaign.
His rhetoric, absolutely.
You see, but when he brought in Geithner and Summers and Holbrooke and others on the foreign policy, it was clear he was recycling Clintonites. It was a neoliberal reconstitution, and it was the very moment in which we could have undermined the neoliberal consensus, both domestically and internationally. He decided to reaffirm it and reconstitute it.
With all due respect, Dr. West, Americans did know where his campaign contributions were coming from.
That's true.
It was clear and transparent and known that Goldman Sachs and other Wall Street banks were making very large political donations to Barack Obama.
That was an interview with Dr. Cornel West in 2011, just a couple years into Obama's presidency. You know, so what we're seeing, the same policies, the same people recycled, and this is something we should expect. I mean, these parties are so controlled here in the United States. We really shouldn't have any belief or faith that they're going to give us anything different, that they're going to all of a sudden decide to start working for the public interest. I mean, we're seeing the same foreign policies, the same economic policies, the same environmental policies. I think this is all something that's a little bit overlooked during Obama's presidency. Let's see, in 2008, let me play a clip from President Obama in 2008. Just one of his many promises about what he was going to do when he took office.
Generations from now, we will be able to look back and tell our children that this was the moment when we began to provide care for the sick and good jobs to the jobless. This was the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal. This was the moment when we ended a war and secured our nation and restored our image as the last best hope on earth.
So I think the important point here is to understand that we can't be trapped or tricked into believing what politicians say. I don't even know why that would be a controversial thing. I mean, politicians are synonymous with lying. So, you know, in this speech here, as he mentioned a number of times in 2008, he had said that it's time to end the tyranny of oil. In my administration, the rise of the oceans will begin to slow. Well, Obama's environmental policies have really set back the entire world. I mean, we're looking at a global warming crisis that's, I mean, it's really threatening the species of human beings. As it is today, the United States is in the top 3 of oil-producing countries. And there was a 2012 speech that I think was very indicative of what Obama really thinks about environmental policy and oil. Let me pull this up for you right here. Over the last 3 years, I've directed my administration to open up millions of acres for gas and oil exploration across 23 different states. We're opening up more than 75% of our potential oil resources offshore. We've quadrupled the number of operating rigs to a record high. We've added enough new oil and gas pipelines to encircle the earth, and then some. In fact, the problem is that we're producing so much oil and gas that we don't have enough pipeline to transport it where it needs to go. Afghanistan TV? Hello? Afghanistan TV?
It's a Nick Aurora.
I think you have the wrong number. So, you know, there's this huge differentiation between what some of these politicians are saying and what they're actually doing. And Obama has been a real master of deception. I mean, he really, as you saw in that clip I had just played about the promises he was making, man, I had never seen this country so hopeful and so excited about a president, and really, really depressing as to the policies that have emerged from what he had promised. When we look at the history of environmentalism, our coal exports have climbed to record highs. You know, there's been some very minor positives, but and a lot of times the credit that Obama has attributed to himself is very embellished. I think in his first term, you know, he used some stimulus money to promote green technology. He won an agreement from Detroit for higher automobile mileage standards. In his second term, he's fighting for EPA regulations on new coal-fired power plants. But really, you know, this battle about coal-fired power plants was really fought and won by environmentalists. So a lot of times, you know, he'll step in and take a lot of credit for what's being done on the ground by a lot of grassroots organizations. And you know, just before the BP oil explosion that devastated New Orleans and the coast, Obama and the White House, they opened up a lot of the U.S. to new offshore oil drilling. In fact, I have a quote here from him saying that oil rigs today generally don't cause spills. They are technologically very advanced. This was before the oil spill. I think, you know, if we look at some things like the Arctic melt in 2012, we have a record amount of ice shelf being melted. We're getting another call from a line that I don't have. So, you know, we can look at all these certain policies from the president and the people in office that he's recycled from previous administrations and that now Trump is recycling back in. And we shouldn't be surprised as to why things are bad and they're going to continue to be this way. And a lot of times, I hear some of the supporters and apologists for Obama saying that, well, you know, he's stuck with the Congress that can't do anything. And while it's true that our Congress doesn't get much at all done, Obama has actively made things worse. He's had a lot of key abilities to do certain things, and he's chosen to do the wrong things. As Commander-in-Chief, that's Chief Operator of the United States military, and we've seen what he's done with his power under the military. You know, we're talking about mass murder. This is what we're talking about. You know, this is not an exaggeration. This is serious. We're talking about millions of lives brutally affected by the policies of the United States. So this is something that we have to seriously address, and we can't accept or be lenient as Ta-Nehisi Coates is being, you know, just because we get caught up in certain things about, oh, well, isn't it great that a black president was elected? Well, sure, you know, that's great that minorities are being more accepted in America, but, you know, we can't be confused or manipulated to not see the truth about what's going on. Let me play another clip here from Dr. Cornel West.
but we're living in a society where everybody's up for sale. Everything's up for sale. And he and Brother Sharpton and Sister Melissa and others, they have sold their souls for a mess of Obama pottage. And we invite them back to the black prophetic tradition after Obama leaves. But at the moment, they want insider access, and they want to tell those kind of lies. They want to turn their back to poor and working people. Well, and it's a sad thing to see them as apologists for the Obama administration in that way, given the kind of critical background that all of them have had at some point.
So as we transition from President Obama to now President Trump, a lot of people are wondering what's going to happen. Well, on the previous show, when I was on with Dr. Kamrani and my own show, we talked about the same people that he's bringing in for his cabinet positions and his administration. And in Afghanistan, I found this clip that he had mentioned. It was very hard to find a lot of quotes from President, or the soon-to-be President Trump, about his thoughts on Afghanistan. Previously, he had even mentioned that we should get out of Afghanistan, but more recently in 2016, just this last year, I think we saw what is a little bit closer to the truth of what we can expect. He was on the O'Reilly Factor with Bill O'Reilly, and this is what he had said about what he would do with Afghanistan if elected.
Now for the top story tonight, Donald Trump giving a big foreign policy address yesterday in Washington. He joins us now from Evansville, Indiana. First of all, you did not mention Afghanistan in the address. We've got about 10,000 troops there right now. Place is still in chaos after 13 years. What exactly will you do about Afghanistan?
I'd stay in Afghanistan. Is probably the one place we should have gone in the Middle East because it's adjacent and right next to Pakistan, which has nuclear weapons. So I think you have to stay and do the best you can. Not that it's ever going to be great, but I don't think we have much of a choice. That's one place, frankly, instead of going to Iraq, we should have probably gone there first. But I would stay in Afghanistan, and only, again, because of its location next to Pakistan.
All right, so you'd keep the 10,000 troops there and fight a war of attrition against the Taliban. You know, Pakistan.
I hate doing it. I hate doing it so much. But again, you have nuclear weapons in Pakistan, so I would do it.
But Pakistan is no friend to the USA. In fact, the guy who helped us, the doctor who helped us, the Pakistani, get bin Laden, they put him in prison. You think you could get that doctor out?
Yes, I do. I think I would get him out in 2 minutes. I would tell them, let him out, and I'm sure they'd let him out because we give a lot of aid to Pakistan. We give a lot of money to Pakistan, and frankly, they will do. They don't have any respect for our president. But when you say they take advantage or they're no friend, nobody's a friend to us. They just take us like a bunch of suckers, Bill, and that's what my speech was about to a certain extent. It was also economic in terms of economic relative to aid and the military. But Pakistan certainly takes advantage like everybody else. Nobody's different.
All right. Now, we talked about ISIS way back in June when you were just launching your campaign. And you said last night the same thing you told me then, that you're not going to tell ISIS how.
So that was President Trump giving or soon-to-be President Trump at the time, giving what I think is a much more honest assessment of how he's going to operate this coming year as Commander-in-Chief. I don't think we should expect anything different. I believe that if anything, he's probably going to escalate the war in Afghanistan. You know, we just saw a troop deployment back to Helmand province of Marines the other week under President Obama. We've seen Trump appoint some of the same generals that were under Obama's rule. So I think what we would expect is a continued occupation in Afghanistan, which is going to just prolong this conflict, prolong the bloodshed until we see at some point somebody's going to have to step in and really take some action to create peace. If you have any further questions, you can feel free to write me on Facebook before I close out here for today. So I think when we look back at Obama's legacy, you know, I can't stand to see any positive responses because all we have seen is just some of the most horrific things on the planet. Get another call here. Afghanistan TV. Hello? Yes, this is Afghanistan TV.
Hello?
Okay, please call back, sir.
Hello?
Yes, you're on Afghanistan TV. Okay, getting some other calls from the other line here. So, if you can take anything from my segment today, it's I hope that I'm trying to get it through to you that what we have is a ruling elite here in the United States, and a lot of the differentiation we might see from rhetoric and political debates and candidates doesn't really mean much. We're seeing the same policies, and until a people's revolution happens in the United States, we're not going to see any sort of change. The money influence in our elections, in our society, and our policy is just too strong at this point to have any faith in our political parties or the system at whole. I think it needs to be completely scrapped and started over. So, we're going to continue to break down some of these lies and some of this misinformation that we see. And, unfortunately, I don't have any hope for the current president under Trump. So, stay tuned for next week. I might be on the show with Dr. Kirmani this Saturday. He'll be talking further about Trump presidency and some of the things that will be happening. You can catch me. I'll be back on Thursdays. We're having some construction, but you can catch me here Thursdays on Afghanistan TV. We stream live on Facebook and Jadu. Let me try to pull up this here. Okay, well, I got to close out here for today, but I hope you've enjoyed the show. Thank you, Sajia. Ahmad Shah had a great show today. Tune in Saturday for some more live programming. Mr. Amiri will be out, but Dr. Kamrani will be live, and we'll see you then.